During this presentation, please use the chat to type questions and we'll get to them during the Q&A at the end. The recording of this event will be available later on our website. Closed captioning is enabled. If you need any support to access this, let us know in the chat. And this slide shows a logo of the Minnesota Inclusive Higher Education Consortium written in gold lettering across a blue shape of the state of Minnesota. As we begin this event, we would like to acknowledge that we are standing on the rightful homelands of Indigenous peoples. It is their current and continued displacement that allows the state of Minnesota to exist today. As part of ICI, we are committed to addressing racism, ableism, and all forms of oppression to ensure inclusive communities. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Julie and Yolanda. Julie Lackey is the director of OKC Alliance. The goal of Oklahoma Ipsy Alliance is to educate, advocate, assist, and collaborate for inclusive post-secondary education options for students with IDD in Oklahoma. She is an Oklahoma Lend Fellow and a member of the technical assistance team for Think College. Most importantly, she is the parent of a young adult who walks to his own drumbeat. And Yolanda Scott is the youth programs manager for Central Oklahoma Workforce Innovation Board. She's known and respected as a champion for youth. She works with community stakeholders, industry leaders, and service providers to create training and employment opportunities for young adults in one of the state's largest populated areas. Yolanda holds a master's degree in education administration and is an Oklahoma certified teacher and administrator. She also serves as co-chair of the Oklahoma Transit Council. Welcome, Julie and Yolanda. Excuse me.
Well, thank you for having us. We are excited to be here. We love to share what we're doing and just want to see what everyone has to think and questions you might have. We're just welcome the whole discussion.
I couldn't hear. It's working, but I couldn't hear. Yeah, in the computer.
If everybody could put
I cannot get the sound when I'm in the Zoom.
Yeah, if everybody could put their microphone on mute, that would be appreciated. No, thank you.
Not right now.
Okay. Anyway, we appreciate being here very much and appreciate everyone's time. So we just want to talk a little bit about strategic partnerships derived from common goals. And we have come together to...
That's so you can talk.
To do a fairly unique partnership. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background for that, from whence we have come, I guess. So next slide. So in Oklahoma, what do we look like now? We have 4 programs that are inclusive post-secondary education programs. 3 of those are for students with intellectual or developmental disability, and one of them is just for students on the autism spectrum. The 3 programs for students with intellectual disability are all comprehensive transition program designated. So they do have the federal designation of a CTP, which allows those students to go through the FAFSA system for Pell Grants and other supports. The program for students with autism is a degree-seeking program. And so as such, it doesn't fall into the CTP designation category. Students can attend that program just through the regular system, while the other 3 programs do have a different application process and they do graduate with a certificate. All of these programs provide very comprehensive supports enhancing independence or interdependent living, social engagement and social skill growth and development, building social capital, academics. Obviously, if you go to college, academics are part of what you're interested. You're interested in continuing to learn. And so in the academics area, programs have the support of very specific tutors. Socially, they have mentors. They have support in the dorms because all of these are residential programs currently to help them with independent living. And then employment is the goal, along with just an enhanced life, obviously, of all the programs, which is to have the job of their choosing. So employment meaning competitive integrated employment that is all about these students being able to have a job that they can pay bills with. A job that really gets them what they are interested in doing after a lot of work at college to be able to do what they want to do rather than just a very small selection of what may be available to them without the college learning and growth that they achieve. And so we are fairly new, okay? Our first program began in 2017. And so we have only had a few graduating classes, but I will say that our students are doing very, very well. We have an 86% employment rate off of the students that have graduated thus far, which is actually beating the national average of 65. So we're very excited about that and want to just continue that path. Okay, next slide. So out of the growth of the program work, following what is best practice across the nation, once you have, programs that are functioning in your state, it is really very helpful to have an alliance that brings together the programs, yes, so they can learn from each other and help support each other, but also to bring together all the different folks that have a touch point with students and families that are impacted by intellectual developmental disabilities. And so we wanted to follow the model of some very successful states with their alliance work. For instance, Georgia comes to mind. And our mission is, yes, what Liz read at the beginning, but it is to educate because we are constantly traveling, we are meeting with folks, we're talking to families, educators, legislators, etc., about what these programs are, because I don't know about how your state is on being siloed or not siloed, but it is to get the word out. I mean, we do have remote areas that are, folks can't come to conferences and transition fairs aren't abounding. And so we really, really work hard to get the word out because the messaging is very, very important. It's so critical that the folks in the state really understand what these programs are and what they are not. There is still a lot of misunderstanding about what they do or don't do. And so it's really important that we're constantly out there educating and getting the word out. We advocate. We are all about how can we support these programs? How can we make sure we have folks in place that will be champions of these programs? Advocating legislatively obviously comes to mind. You are very familiar with that, with all the work that MIHEC has done to get your legislation passed most recently, which is awesome. We are working on legislation as well, and so we advocate to help that happen through targeted education. We are not lobbyists, but we are very, very familiar with the folks at our capital, and they are becoming more and more aware of what inclusive post-secondary education is, and most importantly, what it can do for the students, for the families, because they truly can be a life changer. We assist, technical support basically is the fancy name, but whenever programs need information or they have an issue or they wonder, well, how is this done somewhere else? They call and I go out and we find the solution or ideas for them to tackle. That assistance is a big deal. And basically, our directors are so incredibly busy all the time that they just need someone that can go out and give them a hand sometimes. And just, they get so busy with what they're doing that they don't think, oh, well, yeah, I know, I think that person probably has a solution to that. So we just assist in any way we can to try to lighten the load for program staff as well, and collaboration. So the strength of the Alliance is the collaboration. When we started the path on bringing together key leaders in key agencies. And by that, I mean, we started with DRS Executive Director, Vice Chancellor in the State Regent's Office, officer in DHS, DDS Department, Developmental Disability Services, State Department of Education, and one of our lead resource agencies called Sooner Success. And so we had leadership meetings for about 18 months talking about the Alliance, talking about what the Ipsy programs were, what the mission is, what we wanted to try to accomplish to build the capacity of folks. Okay, yes, this is something we need to be involved with. And so by having that core group of leaders with information and sharing goals and wants and needs, we were able then to add on to that. So our Alliance is quite strong. We have all the folks that you see on the infographic: students and families, employers, advocacy groups, state agencies, of course, the programs themselves, local education agencies, institutions, higher ed, and policymakers. So depending on the meeting, we have 40 folks on those calls typically. And so it's just a really nice way to get information across, make sure the messaging is on target, and just stay true to what our mission is, which is to support these students and the programs and the families that are involved in inclusive post-secondary ed. Okay, next slide. All right, and so everyone has heard it takes a village, and I think the first time I presented on this, it was like, oh no, you can't say that. But I don't necessarily believe it takes a village, because in what we have seen in Oklahoma is that, we are a village, right? But really it's all these folks that operate in the way they're used to operating without connecting. And so I really think it takes a connected community, and that really is what we feel our goal is as the Alliance, is to not just know that these folks are doing their thing, but actually get to know them, to bring them together, to know what's best practice in their area of functionality, to know, okay, I didn't know how you operated. I didn't know you had, those benchmarks, or I didn't know you had those constraints. And so we really get to know our Alliance members. And so the list is shown just a sample of a few of those. We talked about some of these already. And this list is very important because they're just examples of all these folks that have a touch point with students in inclusive post-secondary education. And so we do not try to do all end all for every single issue that comes up in the disability community, we are focused on inclusive post-secondary education and how that works in our state and how we can bring together our partners that work with each other. And so that is our goal for Connected Community. And we have seen some really lovely things come out of just talking to people, finding out about what's important to them, finding out about how we can connect and help each other, get the word out about what their services are, what's going on with them as well. So that's where our Connected Community comes in. Okay, next slide. All right, so strategic partnerships are really the hallmark of what OK Ipsy Alliance is all about. I just want to touch base on, I'm going to watch my time, but I just want to touch base on a few of these partnerships, what we have going on, and as some examples of what we're doing. And so Vocational Rehabilitation, Department of Rehabilitation Services was the first agency to be at the table and really bring a full commitment. Right now, they have a contract with each program that provides up to $3,000 per semester. And it has to go through a family income sliding scale of information, but it can be up to $3,000 per semester, depending on that income. It also pays for up to 15 hours of internship per week. Now, this is all VR clients. And so remember back to that Connected Community, we go all the way back to, okay, everyone that is talking to students needs to be sure that you have the word out that those students need to enroll in VR at 15 and a half, which is when they can enroll in VR. And so we really push that because it takes some time, and depending on the state, you may or may not have waiting lists. We do have some waiting lists in place for different levels of VR application. And so getting students to enroll and then getting them to have inclusive post-secondary education as part of their plan is very, very important. That starts early. And so VR can do a lot for our students. We're very, very excited about the fact that they volunteered to also pay internship hours because across the nation, there's over 320 programs that are listed on the Think College website, for instance. The minority of those have actual paid internship, not the majority. And so we are very proud that we have that for the students because the students are able to work, they're able to get paid. That translates directly into the program staff being able to work with the students about how to manage money, what to do with a paycheck and how far can that paycheck go. And if you spend $200 on Beats headphones, you don't have any money left over to do that fun thing. It just is such a direct learning experience that when you have money in hand, open up a checking account and learn how to deal with it. That's a big, big deal. So we love that they've come to the table, and actually now they're just a week ago looking at expanding what they can do. And so we're in talks with that. And that started as a pilot. And so it was able to, figure out how it needed to set for each program. Each university is a little bit different, but as a pilot without actual changing of their criteria or, all of the legalities, they're able to figure out what's the best fit, how does this work for all the programs, and transition from a pilot into an actual program that VR does. And so how did that come together? We had a common goal, right? We have the goal of employment, gainful, competitive employment for these students. That was our common goal. We wanted subject matter experts at the table. And so we had the executive director of VR write off the bat, and then her team. And we got into a room. We had other folks from other states zoom in to talk about how they did it. Because every state's different. You know, it has to work for how each state is set up. And we had lots of pilot discussions on what that could look like. Certain things were tried and changed along the way. And, you know, even in the last couple of weeks, we're still working out, well, you know, how do we get those parents that just will not return forms? How do we, you know, work with students to stay on their parents to do these things, you know, all those types of things. And so there are challenges, but back to that connected community, because I always go back to that. We know each other, okay? So we can email each other, we can call each other and say, hey, you know, I've got this issue, let's work it out. You can't do that if you don't know each other and if you are not truly connected, you know, and so work a lot on just relationship, and I'm a relationship person, so that works well for me. So Workforce Investment Board, I am going to leave that. Yolanda is going to present on Ipsy Next. But I will just say that it came about the same way. We had common goals, you know, employment again, and working with underserved population. Well, these students with intellectual developmental disabilities are underserved in big time. So we have 4 programs. We have 44 colleges in Oklahoma. Okay. So 4 programs needs to get to be a lot bigger number, right? And so we just are working together and know that we have a common goal for this population. Yolanda is going to talk about the funding and the pilot discussion. I'm going to leave that alone for her. So next slide. Oklahoma City Community Foundation, that is a strategic partner that has just amazing for the students and the family. And so what did they do? Well, that is actually the largest scholarship engine in the nation for students. And we got together through just a random email that they were looking at connecting with new people to see how they could help. And so fast forward a year, and they have revised scholarship language to include students in CTP designated programs. They've expanded their policy to include Ipsy students in all new scholarship endeavors. They have employer connections, and so they have an incredible facility. So they are a host site for employer education and scholarship grant support. And a very, very exciting news. She just called me a month ago and said, hey, Julie, we just awarded 5 of the Ipsy student scholarships because, you know, they just rolled all this out. And, you know, that is tangible, workable help for these students and families. Because as we all know, college is expensive. It doesn't matter if you have a disability or not, college is expensive. And so they have really come on strong to provide support, and they are also a voice, you know, so you also need to think about in your alliance, who is a voice that folks listen to, for instance, in the legislature, in the out in the broader sectors. And so they have a big voice because they are a very integral part of Oklahoma. So how did we get together? Same way. We had a common goal. Education is a big focus for them. It's not employment, but it is education, right? So you're looking for those common goals. And they know that education does lead to employment, but they support education. And so how did they do that? Well, they just made minor changes in their existing processes. All the scholarship language that we have, including in the legislature, did not involve the wording of inclusive post-secondary education or comprehensive transition program, right? Because not they're a bad person, but because that language wasn't in existence when all of their criteria was written. And so minor changes just to allow students in a CTP designated program has made so much possible in such a short time. And then expansion, they are looking at how else can we help? And so they've opened up other grant for our Ipsy programs to apply for grants to help offset cost of staffing. And so that's another important partner. And then developmental disability services through DHS. We do have an ask on the table. Actually, last week was that meeting that the Medicaid waivers can be used, self-directed goods and service dollars towards Ipsy program costs. We have worked on that for a couple of years. We have new leadership now, and so it is in process. But just another example of our strategic partnership. I think that is my section of time. Yeah. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Yolanda.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to just kind of start with how our workforce development boards are organized here in the state. We have 6 local boards, and if you can, as you can see by the map, they're indicated by colors. And Central is right there in the middle. So we have 9 counties, which is the largest metropolis area, Oklahoma City, and all the surrounding counties there. And so when I speak about the programs for Central, I'm speaking specifically about those 9 counties. But I will say too, and it kind of gives you some perspective, hopefully, while there are the 6 local boards, we actually are the fiscal agent or the employer of record for 4 of the 6 boards. So that kind of shows you the capacity. So we take care of all the employment, all the onboarding, and all of the financials, in essence, for those four areas. So just kind of to let you know what our capacity is and how we're being creative in some of the projects that we're doing. Next slide, please. Again, a lot of times people are just not familiar. The workforce development boards are actually nationwide. Every state has boards. The structures may look different, but it is definitely a part of your system if you're not aware of it already. Hopefully after this call, you all will reach out and kind of do some research on how the development boards are structured there in your state. But here in Oklahoma, the boards are responsible for providing workforce services and resources to develop the talent pipeline of the state's workforce. We serve as connectors with Oklahoma Works, the American Job Centers that deliver services to the workers and the employers. So not only do we provide direct services to clients and job seekers, we also have a business services team who works with employers to find they can do a lot of different things. They can do labor market research. They can help with job descriptions. They can work to connect them to employees that are seeking employment to kind of fill their vacancies. So a lot of different services that are available to our employers in the areas as well. We also have strategic plans that we develop locally, and we make sure that they align with our state strategic plan. And further along above that is our Department of Labor. So everything falls with workforce under the Federal Department of Labor. We also facilitate partnerships with local businesses. We do industry sector partnerships. We do a lot of subcommittee type work, working with specific industries. And then we also, like I said before, we provide an analysis of the labor market information. We look at the top jobs. We want to make sure that we're training people in an area that they have a good chance of employment, you know. So we have the top industries, the critical occupations within our area, and we try to provide training that will feed into those specific occupations. Next slide. I am, as was mentioned in the introduction, I'm the youth programs manager. And so with youth programs, again, all WIOA programs for youth will cover the same type of thing. The structure is going to be different, but in essence, it's about education, training, employment, and work readiness. And so under our education and training, with our service provider, we can provide tutoring and study skills. So for instance, if we've had individuals who dropped out or they're functioning, they have basic skills deficiencies in reading and math, then we have resources and provide tutoring so that they can increase those basic skills. We also have dropout recovery and alt-ed options. And then we also have short and long-term training programs. Short-term is usually less than 12 months, and then long-term is up to 2 years. And so we can help offset the cost for those training programs. We understand that there's different doors that our clients might come through. So education is not the only way. Some people may have the education and they're just looking for the employment, or they're just not interested in training, or because of barriers that they have, training is not a good option. And so we offer also employment, we call them WEXs, or work experiences with the youth programs. Within ours, we have paid work experiences. They're really developed very similar to a paid internship, and they are allowed up to 240 hours in our area of paid employment. And so that can be structured anywhere from 15 hours a week to 40 hours a week. It really is based on that individual and what's best for them. And then along with that employment, again, we work with the clients to see, you know, what are their interests. We do interest inventories and assessments, and then we try to match them up with employment that will give them experience in those areas. And then also that helps to build their resumes. So if they have an internship or a work experience, they can add that to their resume. We help them with job searches and then job placements. Along with that, we also have on-the-job training. So it's kind of a step beyond, and it really incentivizes our business partners, because we have businesses who will be work sites. And when the requirement is that the businesses hire them on full-time, but there's a trainee plan, and we identify how much time it takes to train them in that position for that particular job title. And then during the time of training, we can reimburse our employers up to 50% of the wages. So if they hire that individual on at making, I'll say $12 an hour, then they can invoice us monthly, and we can reimburse $6 an hour for everything that they pay. I'm going to cover the requirements in just a moment. And so that's the incentive for our businesses to partner. Julie talked about collaborations and partnerships. That's the benefit for them to be able to kind of extend their capacity, if you will, to be able to help us, but then have the incentive of the reimbursement on their wages. And then work readiness, we do some financial literacy, entrepreneurial training, resume building, leadership, just a whole number of things that fall under work readiness. Next slide. So here's my eligibility. Just in general, this goes for all workforce programs. The youth program eligibilities is if they meet one or more of these bulleted items here. Now, I'm specifically speaking to out-of-school youth. Under WIOA right now, it mandates that 75% of our monies have to be spent on out-of-school youth. So they're out of any kind of school. They're out of high school or college, either one, they're just out of school. And so if they can show that they were a high school dropout, if they are within the age of compulsory age of attendance, so 16 or 17-year-olds, and they haven't gone to school, in my mind, they're still dropout, but it's lined out differently. Maybe they got their diploma, but they're still functioning at a low, under an 8th grade level in reading or math. They're considered basic skills deficient. So they would be eligible for the program if they are ESL or English is their second language, if they're justice involved or an offender, if they're currently in foster care or have aged out of the foster care system, if they're pregnant or parenting, so pregnant meaning the young lady after the child is born, young lady and young man, parenting, if they're parents, then they can show that their name is on the birth certificate, then they're eligible. Individuals with disabilities, homeless, or needs additional assistance. And within our state, we've identified that as they have a parent or guardian who is currently or has been previously incarcerated for a felony, individuals who have parents who did not graduate from high school, or they have attended a chronically underperforming school? These are great questions, and I'm going to get to all of those. So that's another thing that we've talked about. But everything that I'm describing here is for out-of-school youth 16 to 24. So that's all of that. We do have some in-school youth programming, but our budget is very limited. Only 25% of our budget can be spent on in-school youth. And so we're very cautious on how we allocate our funding and our spending, because we don't want to end up running out of the allocated money that we have for in-school youth. So primarily I focus on the out-of-school youth and eligibility for this. So that's how they get into the workforce program. That's how they're eligible. Let's see what the next slide is. Okay. If someone will just put a pin in that question, I do want to address that a little bit later in our conversation. I appreciate that. So since I've been here 8 years. Formerly, I was in education. This is kind of like my dream job because it's the best of both worlds. But I have had the opportunity to really get creative and maximize on the innovation part of the WIOA Act and do some special projects. And so the first one that I have listed here is our P3 project. This is actually an award that we received with the Department of Labor. They have cycles where you can apply for P3 waivers and flexibilities. And so we were finding that, again, with our in-school youth, as I mentioned earlier, there was very limited funding on how much money we could spend on in-school youth. But we were also finding that that's when we could catch them. We could catch them while they were in school, and as soon as they graduate, we lost them. And so we saw the need to kind of have a bridge. If we could connect them right before they graduate, then we would have some carrots to be able to hang out there and give them some incentive to stay connected to us and stay in the programs and then work towards education and employment. So the application was to the Department of Labor for 4 different populations, and the populations were justice involved, foster youth, high school seniors in our Summer Bridge program, which is a partnership with the Department of Education, and then individuals with a disability. I won't go into a lot of detail, but what I will say is we were awarded this partnership and this agreement. And so with that, if the people that we are focusing on are in school and fall within one of those 4 populations, we don't have to use our in-school money. We can actually use our out-of-school money. So we're able to provide more services for those high school seniors that fall into one of those categories, so we can hook them and then bridge them over to post-graduation and hopefully get them either enrolled in training or post-secondary opportunities or employment. Another program that we have is with COJAC, our Central Oklahoma Juvenile Center, and JRAP program. Both of those are justice involved projects. One of them is with group homes with JRAP. And again, we ran into that barrier where what we were doing is we had them in our work experience or paid internship, and the juvenile, Oklahoma Juvenile Affairs agreed to match their wages up to $1,500 and use that money towards their restitution. Because what was happening is the youth and young adults were working, but all of their money was going through to restitution. And so they were discouraged because none of that money was going to their pocket. It was going to restitution. And so we agreed that if they're working, they're doing good things, they're trying to be on the right track. And so they were matched $1,500 to go. Well, they were in school because that was one of the requirements, is if you're in the group home, you have to be going to school. So they were going to school, they were working, so they were classified as in school. Again, we maximized our money for in school, so we had to pause the program. So they were end up being, I can't think of the word. Basically, they were being affected because of our lack of money. So they couldn't continue on with the work experience. And so again, with this waiver, we're able to tap into our out-of-school money so we can continue the program and grow and incentivize these justice involved youth to work and do and build positive skills. So once they exit, hopefully their chances of recidivism is reduced. We've done career exploration and worksite tours. We've worked with DRS on several projects, working on the Wichita's, which was a summer camp, and they went out in the mountains and they camped and they did projects with the parks department there. And then currently we just completed our second year of BEST and STEP. BEST is a portion, it's a partnership with DRS, Department of Rehab Services. The first week they go through BEST, which is work readiness skills and guest speakers and all of the type of things that they need to learn how to prepare for work. And then STEP was a direct part of our involvement as the workforce board, where we were the employer of record. So summer transition employment program. We had this summer 200 and I can't remember the number, 200 and I can't even remember, I'm sorry, 200 plus employees across the state, all individuals with disabilities and in high school or recently graduated, who are either voc rehab clients or potentially eligible clients. So they could be either or. We were the employer of record. We took care of all of their I-9 documentation and onboarding. We did their payroll, we cut their checks and all of those things. So that just kind of gives you an idea of some of the partnerships and special projects that we worked on. And then I'll go into our next one, which is Ipsy Next, and another special project. Next slide, please. So there were several barriers that we had faced as a workforce board and youth programs. One specific individual we had him enrolled in our youth program. He had graduated from high school. He was about 19 or 20 years old, and he was on a work experience. He completed the first stint of the work experience and was eligible for an extension. We could do modifications in our trainee plan. And so we all agreed that he needed just a little bit more experience. And so we were trying to extend his trainee plan another couple hundred hours. But unfortunately, our work site couldn't continue it because they just didn't have the capacity to support this individual. Like, he needed a little bit more, quote unquote, job coaching, if you will. He needed a little bit more direct instruction. And the way that the workforce area and our service providers are structured, we couldn't give that direct on-the-job support. So we have career navigators. They help them with their individual supportive services plan, very similar to an IEP, but it's for workforce, individual employment plan. But we couldn't actually go on site with him. And so unfortunately, he finished the first part of his work experience, but we couldn't continue it on because he didn't have that support. So that got me thinking, like, this is just really unfair. But because of the restrictions under WIOA, we couldn't support him. And so I felt like it was a disservice. So right along the time that happened, Julie came into my office and we just started shooting off ideas, and we really hit it off. And so she was kind of talking about the pain points of the Ipsy projects. And so I was like, okay, let me think on this, because I figured there's a way to get around this and there's a way to be creative and innovative, but I need to wrap my brain around it first. So that's really how the conversation started. We talked about the CTP programs. I was not familiar with Ipsy at all. I have an education background, but this was really new to me. And so she kind of gave me the structure of how this is. But then I too talked about like what workforce is and what we can do. And so we were trying to see how we could mesh and fit together, but then also trying to identify where some of the gaps are. And so while there's a dream of what we'd like to see it be, we had to kind of go where we are at this point. And so next slide, please. So we came up with Ipsy Next. And so along with this, again, just because of the way Ipsy is structured and the restrictions in our funding, again, in-school monies, I'm very limited. So I couldn't really spend a whole lot of money on the Ipsy students. And so what we did, I had some other partnerships, again, with DRS and with OU's National Center for Disabilities and Education and Training program. So I talked to them about my pain points. So not only the young man that couldn't continue his internship, but the things that Julie brought to me and said, okay, there's a need here and there's some gaps in services, but we can't provide it right now the way that it's existing. So fast forward, after about a year of conversation, probably, we were able to get a contract with OU through their pre-ETS program to offer pre-employment transition services. And so that's kind of where Ipsy Next has come through. So our workforce board has co-ed pre-ETS. And so our primary goal is to provide services for job career exploration, work-based learning, post-secondary counseling, workplace readiness, and self-advocacy. So with this contract, we've been able to hire 2 work skills trainers. The nice thing about this is it's a separate contract, and so we don't have to fall under the WIOA guidelines because we're not spending WIOA dollars, nor do we have to stay within our 9 areas that I mentioned on the initial slide, the yellow counties. So our work skills trainers have the ability to travel outside of our area. So the 4 areas that the 4 areas that were covered and the ones that she mentioned for Ipsy, 3 of those 4 fall outside of our area. So we still have the opportunity to serve those areas. And so working on the skills of independent living and competitive integrated employment, the senior year of the Ipsy program, but then also kind of that off ramp after graduation, getting them permanently employed within the communities that they're returning to. All right, next slide. So I kind of went through it a little quickly, but if you'll see, just kind of imagine youth programs is us. And so that's kind of all the programs that I've talked about, but specifically the Ipsy Next. So DRS is funding some of the stuff. I will say that DRS is the funding is kind of a pass-through, I guess, if you will, because Voc Rehab and DRS funds OU pre-ETS programs. So the contract has fallen under pre-ETS so that we can fund our work skills trainers. And then we also have our WIOA Title I funds. So it's not supplanting, it's not duplicating, but different things come in at different times. And so one of the specific examples I'll give is one of our Ipsy students that just graduated in the spring. She had a goal. She wanted to work at a specific place within her community. And so what we did is she went through the program, and after she graduated, well, right before she graduated, our work skill trainers were working with her, finding out where she wanted to work, and she connected the business to our business services team. So fast forward, our business services team was working with that business to set up a site. We got that individual enrolled in WIOA. And so she's eligible because she is 16 to 24 and an individual with disabilities. So she was automatically eligible. And then once she was enrolled in our program under WIOA, now we have her extending her work experience. And so she's getting a paid internship for approximately 6 months. And then hopefully she'll be going into full-time employment. So that's how the workforce piece has tied into it. And so Voc Rehab is doing some paid internship training while they're in school, while they're in the program, the Ipsy programs, but then we can continue that training because we all know they're going to need some extra time and some extra practice with that internship. And so we're able to then tap into our dollars and then go on and hopefully gradually wean ourselves away. And then we have all a positive measures. So Voc Rehab is going to have a positive placement measure. We're going to have a positive placement measure with employment. And then there's also measurable skills gains along with that, if you talk WIOA jargon, but I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, next slide. So this is our reason. This is our kiddos. I'll let you go ahead, Julie, and finish up.
Well, that's the reason. And so these were the first 3 graduates of the first Ipsy program in Oklahoma. And so, you know, I always close presentations with this because this really is why. And I'm going to pick up something else Yolanda didn't talk about, but something that she had forwarded to me. So, you know, we literally, guys, have just started this in April. Okay, this is a true pilot. It's new. Nothing like this has been done in the nation as far as I can find, that Think College can find. And so we're really, really hoping, you know, Yolanda's comment to me when I was sitting in her office pitching this was like, you know, if this works, this should be replicable. So it could be something that workforce comes in with Ipsy and helps support that throughout the nation, because this is a gap. Okay. Some states have better than others as far as their resources to help these students. But overall, we had, you know, we don't have a cliff anymore because we've got these students that are educated. But I like to call them a hybrid population because they are educated students with an intellectual disability. That is something our state has not seen before. Okay. And so employers really are not educated about this. And so that's why it's so important that, you know, we wanted to pull in a new partner that was directly connected to employers as an adult, you know, in adult world, not so much the pre-ets, which is more focused on the high school connect, right? And so that's why when Yolanda was saying, you know, VR has positive measures, workforce has positive measures, because, you know, VR is right there. They're paying for their internships and they're helping them in the programs. But once the students move off into the community, it is really stretching Ipsy staff to be able to do the sort of work skills training or job coaching, if you will, off campus. You know, I mean, all the programs want to keep their costs as low as they can, meaning hopefully not to hire yet more and more people, right, that have to work in the community. So workforce was uniquely able to be that work skills trainer and start working in the communities when these students are doing their community employment, and then go back with them when they move back home in Oklahoma to then help those students continue that incredible work they've done as independent adult learners, and not end up, okay, well, what do I do? Because I don't know about other states. But our state is really stretched on service providers for job coaching. And so we needed someone that really had a focus on this educated population of students with intellectual disability, which is something we hadn't seen. And what Yolanda didn't say was another example, which was amazing, is that there was another student that graduated that her work skills trainers got multiple interviews for. And this student was able to, this graduate, I should say, was able to let his work skills trainers know, you know, I was offered that job, but it just really wasn't a fit for me. So I had to turn it down, and I'm going with this one instead. And you guys, that is why we do what we do. That's what Yolanda and I were like, yes, because, you know, it's not, there was one job and that was all there was. It was that these work skills trainers came alongside. They knew the work that this student had done. They knew his internship. They went out in the community, were able to connect this student, and he was able to pick the job he wanted, just like all of us were able to do. And so that's kind of what it's all about. So I wanted to brag on these new work skills trainers a little bit, because that's really how it should go. So thank you very much for your time. We're jamming a lot in a little bit of time. So there you go.
Thank you both so much. You really did jam in a lot, and we love it all. So, and I could tell we could keep going, and we'll be able to have some Q&A now. And so people, there have been some questions in the chat. We'll also launch a poll to get attendees' feedback, which we really appreciate. So go ahead, when that's appears on your screen, go ahead and fill that out. And otherwise, we can move on to Q&A, and we can we could start with just one question that came up in my mind while you were presenting was that you've got it just struck me that you've got 4 programs out of 44 in colleges and universities in the state. And and you mentioned there's a waiting list with VR. Is there a waiting list to get into these 4 programs?
So the programs average 2 to 5 times more appropriate applications than they have spots for right now. And so there is a very, very much of a population that is not able to get in because the programs don't have the capacity right now for them. So they are all slowly growing, but still, the directors told me that, they get up to, 8 times as many applicants, but really 2 to 5 times appropriate, applicants that are really great fits. And so those are students that are being turned away. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to, if you'd like, Liz, I can interject there were 2 questions that were in the chat for Yolanda, while you were presenting, and I think they both related to the eligibility for the youth program. So I don't know if the person that had put those in there, if those questions were answered or if they had would like you to expand on that.
So I can
Sonia says yes, she is.
Okay. Yeah,
Right.
I was gonna say, if they're in school with our area, we could enroll them as in-school youth 16 to 24 under our pilot if they're in our counties. Because again, under our P3, if they're in our counties, that's the only thing. Ideally, when I said, in an ideal world, what I would love to be able to see is that all of our CT programs are issuing some sort of a credential at the end that is industry recognized, because if they're industry recognized, we could then put those programs on our eligible training provider list with the workforce program, and we could offset some of the tuition costs as well. That's a whole nother conversation, but that's what I'm working towards.
Awesome. Thank you. What is so the employment rate is so high, you said 86%, which is fantastic. What is the follow-up like with students out a ways? Like, what are the plans for continuing? I don't know. It's pretty new, right?
Yeah, but that's a great question. So right now, since the programs are so new, the directors are all about keeping in touch with their students. So we have our first program, which was at a regional size university, so it's a smaller university. They have a very well-defined follow-up system every 6 months. And they're actually meeting with the family and the student to just follow them along. And so that's lovely because it really helps us have good data. It's really hard, as to get survey information back, once the students are gone. And so they're all of that kind of that hands-on is what we're seeing so far with all of our programs, that they know where their students are so far. So it's an every 6 months deal pretty much across the board or more because the students don't want to let go of the programs either, even when they move back home. So.
Thanks. Anybody else have a question they want to toss out? I don't see more in the chat right now.
One question that I had for Julie and Yolanda is what sort of new connections, or how has the partnership between the 2 organizations strengthened the connections with the business community and potential or prospective employers?
I could probably speak on that. Right now, it's literally a matter of cold calling. So our work skills trainers visit with the the students and kind of find out what their interests are, and then they go out into the community and start talking about the programs, you know, and talking about what the partnership would look like. And that's really, at this point, is, other than that, there's no formal way of doing it. Now, I will say with that, we also have, I mentioned the Best Step program. We have 196 employers that were hiring those students with disabilities this summer. So we have a pool of employers that we know support these type of projects. And so we've used that list also as an option for placement if they fall within those general areas where the students are working. So that's kind of our connection right now, just using other projects and past employers to be able to pool in and use those as options as work placement for the Ipsy students. Does that answer your question?
I think another way that the partnership collaboration also is working is that, so we have another, you know, member of the Alliance that received a grant to go and do employer training. And so, you know, that's something that Yolanda and I have actually talked to that director about. Well, so if we have an employer, you know, that is really interested and connected, you know, could you do the training? And she said, absolutely. So, you know, that's another way, you know, that we're all trying to connect the dots and get more information out there to more of the general population. So employers are so critical because, you know, if it's an unknown, that tends to be ooh, I don't want to do that. But, you know, the more people understand, you know, very simple things about working with those with disabilities, that it's less of an unknown, and it's like, yeah, okay, you know, and knowing there's support out there. You know, the work skills trainers honestly serve such a big role of, okay, they are educated folks that really know this population, and the employers know that they can call and get a question answered. You know, I mean, Yolanda, I know you already shared that, yeah, you've gotten calls about, hey, you know, what do we do in this situation? And so there's someone there that is able to help those employers, and so those employers are more willing to hire someone they haven't hired before, you know. So,
And our work skills trainers, they talk to the employers about modifications and accommodations in the workplace. We're actually sending them to other training so that they'll be trained the trainers. They can do formalized training with our employers for all different types of populations with barriers. And so we're making sure that our staff are fully trained. And then we also, there's a business services team with Department of Rehab Services that they're working with also, so that they're ensuring that they're communicating the right information and are aware of the resources that are available. Like we have Able Tech, and so if there's materials in assistive technology that needs to be used, whatever the case may be, we're just trying to make sure that they're fully informed so that they can connect those businesses to those resources as well.
Thank you. I'm just going to take a second to say thank you to everyone for attending, and thank you to Yolanda and Julie. And if we can, we have another question in the chat, and people can stay on till 4:15. We welcome you to stay on and just have more discussion. But for those of you that need to leave, we thank you for attending.